It's been a year since Michael, my husband, passed away. A sudden stroke had taken him from us, leaving a void in our lives that seemed impossible to fill. He was not just my husband but my rock, my partner, and the glue that held our little family together. My son, Ethan, stepped up in ways I never imagined. At only 24, he had a maturity beyond his years. He put aside his own grief to take care of me, always ensuring I wasn't alone in my sorrow. Ethan had always been a kind and attentive son, but after his father's death, he became my lifeline. This morning, Ethan walked into the kitchen holding something behind his back, his face lit with a mischievous smile. "Good morning, Mom," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "I have a surprise for you." "A surprise?" I asked, arching a curious eyebrow. "Come outside," he urged, his excitement contagious. I followed him to the driveway, the early sunlight bouncing off the sleek silver paint of a car I instantly recognized. "Oh my goodness," I gasped. My dream car, a convertible I'd always admired but never allowed myself to want, was parked there, gleaming in the morning light. "Do you like it?" he asked, grinning from ear to ear. "Like it?" "Ethan, it's beautiful. But how did you?" "It's yours, Mom. You've done so much for me, for us. You deserve this." His eyes softened, a touch of vulnerability breaking through his confident exterior. "I know you've been feeling trapped at home. I thought this might bring a little joy back." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Ethan, I don't even know what to say. This is too much." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "You've always sacrificed for everyone else. It's time you had something for yourself." His words struck a chord deep within me, and I threw my arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This means the world to me." That evening, we took the car out for a drive, the top down and the wind rushing through our hair. We laughed as we sped down familiar roads, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in months, I felt a lightness in my heart. Ethan didn't just give me a car, he gave me a reminder of what it felt like to live, to embrace the beauty of the world outside my grief. His love and care made the impossible seem possible again. When we parked back in the driveway, Ethan turned to me, his expression serious. "Mom, I know you've been struggling. I can't bring Dad back, but I'll always be here for you. You're not alone." And I believed him, because in Ethan's unwavering love and support, I found the strength to move forward, carrying the memories of my husband and the promise of brighter days ahead. As days turned into weeks, Ethan continued to show me a side of him I'd never fully appreciated before. It wasn't just the grand gesture of the car, it was the little things he did every day that reminded me I wasn't facing life's challenges alone. It started with small moments. One morning, as I stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and not quite ready to tackle the day, Ethan was already there, apron on, cooking breakfast. "I figured you could use a break from cooking," he said with a wink, setting a plate of perfectly fluffy pancakes in front of me. "You're spoiling me, Ethan," I said, laughing softly. But deep down, his thoughtfulness warmed my heart. "You deserve to be spoiled, Mom," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You've done so much for me. Let me take care of you for once." It wasn't just breakfast, either. Ethan was always one step ahead, finding ways to make my days a little brighter. When I couldn't bring myself to clean out the attic, where so many of Michael's belongings were stored, Ethan quietly took on the task. He didn't pressure me to go through anything, just made sure it was organized and ready for when I was ready. One rainy afternoon, I found him in the living room, carefully arranging flowers in a vase. I stopped in my tracks, watching him for a moment. "Flowers?" I asked, tilting my head. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," he said, glancing up with a small smile. "I just thought the house could use some color. And I know you love lilies." My chest tightened at his thoughtfulness. Michael had always brought me flowers for no reason, and Ethan must have remembered. "You're something else, you know that?" "I try," he said, flashing me his signature grin. But it wasn't just the thoughtful gestures. It was the way he looked at me, as though I was the most important person in his world. Ethan had a way of noticing even the smallest changes in my mood. If he saw me staring out the window for too long, lost in thought, he'd bring me a cup of tea and sit beside me in comfortable silence. If he caught me sighing over a heavy chore, he'd swoop in and take over, telling me to rest. "You don't have to do everything by yourself, Mom," he reminded me constantly. "I'm here." One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, you're incredible," he said, his tone sincere. "Where's that coming from?" I asked, smiling at him. "It's true," Ryan said with a small shrug. "You've always been the strongest person I know, even when everything was falling apart. I don't know how you manage it." I turned my gaze away, his words striking deeper than I expected. "I'm not as strong as you think," I admitted quietly. "Half the time, I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Ryan reached across the small table and rested his hand over mine. "You don't have to keep it all together every day. Lean on me when you need to. That's what family is for." I gave his hand a soft squeeze, unable to put into words how much that meant. He had this way of making me feel understood, as if he could see the weight I carried even when I tried to hide it. As the weeks turned into months, Ryan became my anchor. He gently nudged me out of my routine, encouraging me to live again. One evening, he showed up with a grin and 2 tickets to a cooking class.
"Come on, Mom.
"Something fun for us to do together," he said, his excitement impossible to resist. I went, though I wasn't sure I was ready for something so lighthearted. But within minutes, I found myself laughing harder than I had in ages. Ryan was hilariously bad at sticking to recipes, tossing in random ingredients with a dramatic flair. When our soufflé sank into a sad heap, he gave me an exaggerated look of despair. "Well, we might not be chefs, but hey, we've got a great story now," he said, making me laugh until I had tears in my eyes. Ryan had this way of giving me back little pieces of myself. Even his compliments caught me off guard. One evening, as I got ready for dinner with an old friend, he stopped mid-step when he saw me in a dress I hadn't worn in years. "Wow, Mom," he said, genuinely surprised. "You look incredible." I felt heat rush to my cheeks. "Oh, stop," I said, waving him off. "It's just an old dress." "No, really," he said firmly. "You look beautiful." The words lingered with me the entire night, like a secret I carried just for myself. He kept finding ways to pull me back into the world. One weekend, he surprised me with a trip to a nearby vineyard, knowing how much I loved wine tastings. We walked through rows of vines, laughing as we tried to sound sophisticated describing the flavors. "You might have a hidden talent," Ryan teased. "Maybe wine tasting's your future career." I rolled my eyes, smiling.
"Right.
Because that's realistic." Those little moments stitched something back together in me. His love reminded me that even in loss, there was still room for joy. That night, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and then the lights flickered twice before shutting off completely. "Ryan," I called, the sudden darkness swallowing the room. "I'm right here," he called back, his voice calm. Moments later, he appeared in the doorway, flashlight in hand. "Looks like the storm knocked the power out," he said, scanning the room with the light. "Well, this feels kind of cozy," I said with a soft laugh, drying my hands on a towel. Ryan grinned. "This takes me back. Remember those blackouts when I was a kid?" "How could I forget?" I said, smiling at the memory. "You'd beg me to play games with you." "Exactly," he said, his grin turning mischievous. "So why not now?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Hide and seek," he said, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Just like old times. Come on, it'll be fun." "Hide and seek." I laughed. "Ryan, we're not kids anymore." "Doesn't mean we can't act like it for one night," he teased. "Unless you're scared I'll find you too fast." That was enough to spark my competitive side, and he knew it. "Fine," I said, crossing my arms. "But don't think I'll make it easy." He was already counting down as I darted into the dark hallway, flashlight in hand. The house was familiar, yet strange in the shadows, the storm outside making every creak feel louder. I crouched behind the couch in the den, trying to stay quiet. Ready or not, here I come. Ryan's voice called out, his footsteps slow and deliberate as he moved through the house. You know, Mom, he called, his voice teasing, you've got to do better than this if you want to stay hidden. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from laughing. Ryan's shadow moved past the den's doorway, and I held my breath, praying he wouldn't double back. But just when I thought he was gone, he turned around, his flashlight sweeping the room before landing on me with a triumphant grin. Gotcha, he declared, aiming the beam directly at me. Ugh, you're too good at this, I said, standing up with a laugh. Years of experience, he teased. Your turn to find me now. We switched roles, and I spent several minutes creeping through the house, listening for him. Somehow, Ryan moved like a pro, darting from one hiding spot to another before I could catch him. Finally, when I slid open the guest room closet, I spotted him crouched low with a sheepish smile. Ha! Caught you, I said, breathless but grinning. All right, he laughed, raising his hands in surrender. I give up. We collapsed onto the couch, laughter spilling into the quiet house. The storm rumbled outside, but inside, it felt warm, almost timeless, like we'd stepped back into an easier, happier time. You're surprisingly good at this, I admitted, shaking my head. But next time I'm winning. You're on, Ryan chuckled. Then his tone softened, his eyes catching mine. I'm glad we did this. It feels normal, you know? I nodded, understanding completely. It does. The power stayed out, and we spent the rest of the evening talking and swapping old stories. Ryan leaned back, listening as I teased him about his childhood mischief. You were such a handful back then, I said, nudging his arm. And you were ridiculously patient, he replied, smiling warmly. I don't know how you managed. I shrugged. It's easy to be patient with someone you love. The words lingered between us, heavier than I meant them to, but neither of us looked away. Ryan reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face, his hand lingering just a moment too long. You're incredible, Mom, he said quietly. I hope you know that. My cheeks warmed, and I gave him a small smile. Thank you, Ryan. That means more than you realize. The storm outside began to settle, leaving only a soft patter of rain. Ryan helped me light a few candles, the flickering glow painting the walls with warm shadows. We stayed there on the couch, talking and laughing until the night blurred into morning. For the first time in so long, I felt at peace. Ryan's kindness, his unwavering care, reminded me that even through loss, life could still hold moments of light. As I drifted off later, I realized just how close we had grown, not just as mother and son, but as two people holding each other steady through life's storms. The rain eased to a gentle rhythm, tapping against the windows. Candlelight shimmered across the room as Ryan and I stayed curled up on the couch, letting the quiet wrap around us. We should watch a movie, he suggested, reaching for the remote. Something easygoing. No thrillers, I've had enough excitement tonight. I laughed softly. Agreed. Maybe something romantic? Ryan raised an eyebrow, pretending to be shocked. You suggesting a romance? I nudged his arm playfully. Don't act so surprised. I love a good love story as much as anyone. He eventually picked a classic romance I hadn't watched in years. The sound of rain blended with the soft dialogue, and for a while, we simply sat, the silence comfortable. At first, there was space between us, but as the story played on, Ryan shifted closer, his arms slipping gently around my shoulders. Is this all right? He asked, his voice quiet, almost tentative. I hesitated just long enough to feel my heart skip before smiling. Of course. It's nice. And it was. His arm wrapped around me with a warmth that felt familiar, yet strangely new. It reminded me of his childhood hugs, but now there was something different, something softer, lingering in the way his fingers brushed lightly against my arm. You remind me of the lead character, Ryan said suddenly, his gaze warm. I blinked, caught off guard. Me? Really? Why? She's strong, he said simply. Even when things don't go her way, she keeps going. She doesn't give up on the people she loves. His words settled over me like a blanket, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. That's a sweet thing to say, Ethan. But I'm not sure I'm as strong as you think. You are, he insisted, his voice gentle but firm. You've been through so much, and you're still here. You're incredible. Before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. The gesture was innocent, affectionate, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me that I couldn't quite explain. I turned to him, startled, but his expression was calm, his eyes filled with nothing but sincerity. Ethan, I began, unsure of what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said, cutting me off gently. I wanted you to know how much you mean to me. You've always been there for me, and I want to be here for you, too. I nodded, unable to find the right words. Instead, I leaned into his embrace, resting my head against his shoulder. The movie played on, but neither of us was really watching anymore. The weight of his arm around me, the warmth of his body pressed against mine, it all felt so natural, so grounding, that I didn't want the moment to end. As the final credits rolled, Ethan shifted slightly, turning to face me fully. Thank you for tonight, he said, his voice quiet. I can't remember the last time I felt this happy. Me neither, I admitted, meeting his gaze. You've done so much for me, Ethan. More than I could ever repay. You don't have to repay me, he said with a small smile. I just want you to be happy. We sat in silence for a while, the movie forgotten as the rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle. The air between us felt charged, not with awkwardness, but with an unspoken understanding. Ethan's hand rested on mine, his thumb tracing small, soothing circles against my skin. You're my everything, Mom, he said finally, his voice breaking the stillness. I don't know what I'd do without you. Tears welled up in my eyes at his words, and I reached out to cup his cheek, my thumb brushing away a stray strand of hair. I'm so lucky to have you, Ethan, I whispered, my voice trembling. You're my everything, too. The weight of the moment pressed down on us, heavy with emotions neither of us could fully articulate. But in Ethan's steady gaze and the warmth of his touch, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. It was a connection deeper than words, a bond that went beyond the traditional roles of mother and son. As the candles burned low and the rain outside faded into silence, we stayed there on the couch, wrapped in each other's presence. It was a moment of closeness I knew I would treasure forever. A reminder that even in the darkest times, love had the power to heal and to bring us back to life.